Hey guys, Sharpend here. In this video I'm going to show you how to remake the atmospheric intro from Blinding Lights by The Weeknd. It sounds something like this. So I recently got to check out The Weeknd's latest album, and one of the tracks that really attracted me sound design wise was Blinding Lights, thanks to its really unique intro. It sounds something like this. It really sounds like something out of a movie, so I've decided to recreate it. And while this looks complicated, it's fairly simple, so let's go one by one. The sub bass is the most simple layer, so we'll start with it. It's just one note, and inside Serum it's basically a triangle wave that has some unison, two voices, and the detune is really low. In addition to that, I also went to global and reduced the width of our unison so that it sounds less chorus-ish and very focused. So here's how it would sound without the unison. And with the unison, it sort of adds a volume modulation to it. As you can see, the volume slowly changes over time, which adds a very nice movement. And in addition to that, I've low passed it because it has some annoying mid frequencies, so they're being low passed. And I've also added some attack to our volume envelope so that it takes some time for it to gain volume, and it has some sustain and some release as well. And that is it for the sub bass patch. It's just there to give it some extra weight to our main bass patch. So this one is also in Serum. It's two saw waves. One is an octave below and one is an octave above from the other one. And they're being detuned by a tiny bit. This one is 5 cents below and this one is 5 cents above. And this creates a very nice chorus effect. And then they're being low passed by quite a bit, and I'm using envelope number 2, which has no sustain and a very long decay, to modulate our low pass filter to open back up. So this creates this sort of opening up and closing effect that is very reminiscent of 80s synths and such. And that is mostly thanks to the resonance, because without the resonance it sounds pretty bland. So that's why we're adding it. And I'm also adding a sub bass, which is an octave above. It just adds some additional harmonics. Here's how it would sound alone. And no effects at all. So altogether you get this sound. Now once you start adding effects, it gets really interesting. So I've started by adding filter jam. So filter jam basically uses the emphasis knob here to just create resonant peaks in your sound. So I've changed the frequency to be exactly on the octave of F, so that when this note plays, it has a very resonant peak that you can see here. I'm going to play it without filter jam for a second. And now with filter jam. And this resonant peak just sounds great for atmospheric cinematic bass sounds. So that's why it's there. And then I'm using Realm, which for some reason won't register for me, but it's still a great reverb. So I'm using it on 100% wet. The decay is on 13 seconds, the diffusion is pretty high, the size is pretty high, and I'm also low passing it by quite a bit, so that way we don't get too much bright frequencies in our bass, because it's supposed to be bassy and pretty muddy and in the back of our mix. Then I'm also adding some EQ that removes a tiny bit of high frequencies that were annoying to me, and altogether you get this sound, which already sounds pretty epic. Once you add the sub bass, it gives it that extra weight. And then there's another bass synth. This one is the same patch. The only difference being is that I added some white noise. And I've also added a lot of distortion, and I've filtered it for the second time. So here's how it would sound with just the white noise. It's a lot of white noise, it's at 50% volume. And once you add the distortion, it gets really nice. And then I'm just using another low pass filter to do the exact same movement, opening up and then closing back again, using the same envelope. Now, once you add some reverb again round, this time at like 50% wet, some more distortion, and just remove all of the lows. You don't need the lows because you have a bass synth and a sub bass already. You don't need the way too trebly frequencies, you just need the mids, mostly the high mids. So that's why my EQ looks like that. We don't need the lows, we don't need the very highs, we need this area. So you get a very nice sound. And you can hear it in the original as well, that there's a very tiny synth like this. At the beginning the bass is very subtle in high frequencies. And then there's this tiny hit that adds some more high frequencies to our bass, so this is that tiny hit. And then with our main bass and sub bass we get this sound, which already sounds great. And then we also have a pad synth. So this one is fairly simple. It's just a sine wave and a triangle wave. They're both being low passed because the triangle adds some additional notes that I don't want. Some additional harmonics, which are all of these. So I'm just low passing it. There is some attack on our volume envelope. It decays a tiny bit to our sustain, which is at -5 dB, and it has a long release so that notes sort of get cluttered up with each other and get muddy, and that's on purpose, sort of like emulating reverb. And it also has some chorus to make it sound more interesting. And that's it. Now for the effects that I've added outside, there's two rev plates. They're only adding drive. They're not adding any reverb. It's on 100% dry. It's just there to distort it a bit. And then again some ROM, this time at around 70% wet. The decay is at 8 seconds. And as you can hear, this adds also a very nice touch to our atmosphere. And then we have an improv synth. So this one is a synth that I highly recommend using. Basically just choose any patch that you like. I chose this one. And all I did was just improv with it. I just played the main melody from Blinding Lights. And then I just fed it into Granular synthesis. So here's that sample. And I just fed it by setting the random position all the way up. I've set it to loop, I've changed the sample start time, and I've increased the hold so that each grain is at 500 milliseconds of length. And then the grain spacing is fairly low so that we get a lot of grains at the same time. So you get this mess, but once you add some reverb, quite a lot of reverb, on like 20 seconds decay, and then another reverb as well, you get this thing, which can be great. So I've recorded it into audio. So that is these two here. We have this one. Wait, let's enable it. And there's a low octave one as well, which is just these reverb tails that I've recorded and then reversed. That's all. And then I'm sending them to a group which also has filter jam to also increase some resonant peaks, and it has a delay plugin that adds quite a lot of reverb so that when the atmosphere stops playing we can still get a really long tail of reverb so it doesn't cut abruptly. So here's how it would sound without these effects. It cuts very abruptly and it sounds a bit more clear, and the filter jam sort of makes it a bit more blurry. And then with the replica it also sounds not too abrupt because we have that reverb tail. And now there's one more synth. I call it the wah synth. It's a fairly simple patch as well. Basically it's two saw waves, and I'm modulating the fine tune by around 13 or 12. And I'm setting it to not BPM, to Hertz mode in the LFO, and it just goes over the different pitch values very slowly, so that it sort of sounds like an old synth that's drifting in pitch. And I've also added another LFO that controls this low pass filter. So without it would sound like this, and with it, it just opens it and then closes it back down. Again with some resonance, and as you can see the rate is fairly low, it's at 0.7 Hertz, so that it takes some time until it stops going through the cutoff. Then I've added quite a lot of unison, some dimension expanding, quite a lot of chorus as well, and I've just cut off the very high frequencies so that you get this tiny riff. And then I've added a bunch of effects. So I've added filter jam again to just add some resonant peaks, and I've also added an EQ that just low passes it by quite a bit. And then I've added some reverb on almost 100%, technically 100% wet. The reverb time is on 8 seconds, so it's a really long reverb. And one more thing to notice is that I'm using the low pass filter to just close it over time, so that the first notes that this synth plays are fairly open, and then over time it gets more closed. So it sort of feels like the synth is drifting away from you, and it sort of sounds like the original, where you have the first note which is very dramatic and open, and then it just closes pretty fast, so it's there to emulate it. And basically all together you get this sound. And that is pretty much it. Check the description below to download the MIDI file for this project. If you found this tutorial helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below what subject you want me to cover up next time.